Thanksgiving long weekend. Tonight, some seniors are back to window visits after a spike in COVID cases at long-term care homes.
You can tell it bothers her, but there's not a whole lot we can do.
Cases are way up. We'll take you through the numbers and hear from families distanced this long weekend.
International students are more often than not seen as cash cows, and it's disappointing that we are seen in this way because we provide so much benefits to the Canadian economy.
A partial victory, advocates say, for international students who've long fought to work more. How the change could help the labor shortage, at least temporarily, we'll explain. And
the table's neatly set. There's your chair. Thanksgiving.
Could this be Canada's first ever great Thanksgiving tune? We'll introduce you to the Toronto jazz singer who sure hopes so.
This is CBC Late Night News.
Thanks for joining us. We have developing news out of North York to tell you about. One man is dead after a triple shooting tonight. It happened inside an indoor soccer arena in the Finch and Alness area near York University.
Officers arrived on scene and located 3 males that all had received gunshots. All 3 were transported to local trauma centers, and sadly, 1 male has been pronounced.
Officers say all of the 3 men who were shot are over the age of 20. Police have not released any suspect information yet, but they are canvassing the area for witnesses. Anyone with information is asked to call police. Meantime, a man is dead after a shooting in Scarborough last night. Police have identified him as 62-year-old Clive Jones of Toronto. The shooting happened just after 11 o'clock at Weston Road and Lawrence. Another man turned up at a nearby hospital with a gunshot wound. Police believe both men's injuries are related to the same shooting and say numerous people were seen leaving the area. We have some devastating news out of Hamilton. Police say 2 children were killed after the ATV they were riding with their father crashed into a pond. Officers say the 35-year-old dad driving his side-by-side ATV with his 8-year-old daughter and 6-year-old son. The father was able to get out of the pond. He called for help. His 2 children were taken to hospital where they died. Meantime, the OPP are joining other Canadian police services this long weekend for Operation Impact.
If you're going to be on the roads today, this weekend, or anytime this season, please make sure you understand how important it is that you drive safely and responsibly and share the road with others.
The OPP says more than 260 people have been killed on provincial roads so far this year alone. It is the long weekend. For some seniors, it's another holiday of visiting loved ones through the window. That's because COVID cases are once again spiking in long-term care homes. Delia Ashry was at one home tonight speaking with families.
This essential caregiver spending an early Thanksgiving with his 94-year-old mother.
I'm grateful to be here.
For others, a much different scene. Yet another holiday outside of their loved one's window.
Last couple of years, we haven't been really getting together as a whole.
That must be hard.
Yeah.
I think hard for her.
Yeah, we've kind of, it is what it is. She sometimes, you can tell it bothers her, but there's not a whole lot we can do.
They're visiting their 71-year-old mother. Chris King has some unanswered questions.
We're all tested before we go in. So how is it getting in there?
So far, there are 150 active COVID outbreaks in the province, compared to 14 this same time last year and 51 in 2020. This long-term care advocate says it's unacceptable at this stage.
Very little is seemingly being done to beef up infection prevention and control in these facilities and to really provide appropriate PPE across the board.
Kate Dempsey has been a resident at Extended Care Scarborough for the past 9 years. She's noticed staff has been under a lot of pressure throughout COVID.
I'm thankful for the COVID free.
Dempsey tells me she shares a room with a resident who recently tested positive for COVID. She also says they weren't relocated to another room. And while she's not concerned, others say they are.
They make a whole lot of sense to me. If somebody has it in the room, they should be isolated, but do they have the space to do this?
We reached out to Extendicare for comments on their infection prevention policies, but did not hear back in time for broadcast. And on Wednesday, the home was advised by Toronto Public Health that residents should remain in their rooms, but one-on-one activities and physio programming will continue. As for the Ministry of Long-Term Care, it says health and safety measures remain in place, like administering the bivalent vaccine to eligible residents. Dahlia Ashery, CBC News, Toronto.
To another big story tonight, the ongoing scandal gripping Hockey Canada. Last night saw a high-profile resignation, but many say that is not nearly enough. Susanna De Silva has more on the continued calls for major change.
Along with talk of great plays, there's also talk about Hockey Canada's future at local rinks right now.
I think a new name, a whole new regime, everything, right?
I think they should just get rid of the whole thing altogether, really.
It's definitely going to end up having to be a mentality and a change, and I think that comes with more than just one person.
He's talking about interim Hockey Canada board chair Andrea Skinner. She resigned this weekend after controversial testimony.
Our board, frankly, does not share the view that senior leadership should be replaced on the
Skinner was speaking at a parliamentary committee meeting over Hockey Canada's handling of sexual assault allegations and funds used to settle them.
To scapegoat hockey as a centerpiece for toxic culture is, in my opinion, counterproductive.
A view not shared by many.
That's just another example of the old guard thinking that they own our game and they control everything that happens in our sport.
Former NHLer Akeem Aliou says Skinner's resignation barely begins to deal with the changes needed.
And until we can get new blood, some innovative thinking, and just a new perspective of where the game should go, and just to get with the times of what's going on in 2022, we're not going to be able to see any tangible change.
This is now the second board chair they've lost in 2 months, and the executive leadership team remains intact.
There are renewed calls for President and CEO Scott Smith, who took over in July, but has been a leader in the organization in different capacities for decades, to testify again before the House of Commons committee, as sponsors have fled and local hockey organizations examine next steps.
We have to acknowledge, though, that there has been an undercurrent that has existed in the dark corners of our sport. The entire country is just now finally talking about the unspoken.
Hockey Canada was supposed to elect a new board next month, but delayed that until December 17th to allow for a review of a report by a retired Supreme Court justice looking at their governance structure, and to allow them to potentially implement any recommendations. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
International students and advocates celebrating what they're calling a partial victory tonight. The federal government has made a temporary change. Hundreds of thousands of foreign nationals studying in Canada can now work more hours. Ryan Patrick Jones has reaction.
The shawarma, falafel, and other tasty food in this Middle Eastern restaurant are mostly prepared by international students working on their time off. Restaurant manager Frishta Ghafouri says hiring these days is difficult. And while her student employees are eager and hardworking, scheduling around the 20-hour restriction has been a challenge.
A really good thing that they're changing it. Temporary. I hope it stays for longer, though, because it will be helpful for them and also for all the businesses.
According to the federal government, the change will affect around 500,000 international students and will help fill some of the 1 million open jobs across the country. This international student from Ghana also serves on the student executive at the University of Toronto's Mississauga campus. He says it's a victory for himself and his classmates that will allow them the opportunity to earn extra income and professional experience.
We've been fighting for this for a long time. Nonetheless, it's only on a temporal basis. I'd like to implore the government to think about the situations numerous international students go through. They work under the table to fund education that is rising at an astronomical rate.
The change comes after a long campaign by migrant workers' advocates and students. It took off in 2019 when an Indian student named Jobandeep Singh Sandhu was arrested and eventually deported after working more than 20 hours as a trucker. The new program ends at the end of next year and only includes students who already have a permit or who applied before last Friday. Advocates say that's not an adequate long-term solution.
These temporary
Temporary measures that exclude too many will continue a system where some people have more rights and some people don't. And what this does is allow schools or landlords, employers to take advantage of those who have the less power to speak up.
International students are more often than not seen as cash cows, and it's disappointing that we are seen in this way because we provide so much benefits to the Canadian economy.
They say making these temporary changes permanent is the only fair solution that also addresses Canada's labor woes. Ryan Patrick Jones, CBC News, Toronto.
The rising price of food plus inflation, all of it making it challenging for some families to even afford getting together this long weekend. Ithil Musa shows us how one organization is offering a helping hand and also serving culturally relevant food.
Members of Toronto's African Food Basket are prepping. The nonprofit organization provides the city's African, Caribbean, and Black communities in need with free culturally relevant food baskets. And this Thanksgiving, they'll be giving away hundreds.
What you'll see in our baskets are Caribbean sweet potatoes, eddos, cassava.
The organization says Black Torontonians are 3.5 times more likely to be food insecure. The pandemic only made things worse. Then food prices shot up.
It's not just inflation, it's also shipping and how things come into the country. So typically where we would have been putting, let's say, 4 pieces of plantain in a box, we might have to reduce that to 3 or 2 just because of the prices that are going up.
Well, so for Thanksgiving, like I said...
Elena in Toronto says she relies on food banks to get by, and this Thanksgiving will be no different. But she says food banks are struggling to meet the demand.
They have less, and there's more people coming, so they have to stretch that.
At Vancouver's Union Gospel Mission, they're also dealing with a similar challenge, less and less money.
You can see in 2020, it was $5.69 for the turkey breasts or whatever, and 2021, you can see it jumped up to $6.81.
Kitchen manager Randy Sparks says he's now paying $7.99 a pound for turkey breast. Skyrocketing costs have led to creative measures to save even just a little bit.
Making sure that we show our volunteers when they come in to cut closer to the celery stalk and don't take off too much. And, you know, little cost-cutting things like that, they really add up when you talk about the numbers and the bulk that we do here.
Sparks says he's already anticipating the same challenges and the same level of need at Christmas. Ithil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Sophia is here with our first look at the forecast. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like last Thanksgiving you were talking about barbecuing turkey and sitting out in the backyard with a glass of wine. Not so this year, I would say.
You took the quote right out of my mouth. I think it was shorts and t-shirt as well that I added in last year. Definitely more of a knit sweater type situation, and so much so, but there is someone in the country enjoying the shorts, the t-shirt, and the glass of wine on the patio. We're down to 7 into the overnight, and this cool troughing pattern that we're in, well, the polar opposite, literally, 12 degrees in the Northwest Territories, so it could be better, that's for sure. But we're not so bad, and we're improving. That is the story. Not quite the wine on the patio, though, quite yet. But we have this front to get through into the overnight, some showers that may even linger into the Niagara region for your Monday morning. And then the improving story really gets going Monday, the mid to high teens. Plenty of sunshine for a lovely fall hike for Thanksgiving. Cool Monday overnight, some of that patchy frost into cottage country. And then when we come back in the long range, we'll talk about Tuesday. It's that highlight day, Shannon, with all that sunshine and the elusive 20-degree warmth.
Okay, I can't wait. We'll see you shortly.
We'll have Thanksgiving then.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I suppose now we have to talk about last night, the Blue Jays. You saw at the start of our show yesterday, the Jays were up 8-1. Well, then, as you probably know, Game 2 in the wild card series against Seattle took a bit of a turn. Greg Ross takes us through the Jays' crushing loss.
A walk in the park. Not exactly what these Blue Jays fans thought this day would hold.
I thought, good, we got a game on Sunday.
That's what Robin and Christine Williams were thinking while watching the Blue Jays do this.
Swinging a drive again. Teoscar has done it again.
The Jays were facing elimination in Game 2 of their wild card series against Seattle. At one point, Toronto was leading 8-1. That's when the Williams started making plans to get tickets for Game 3. they weren't the only fans looking ahead.
It was a wrap. It was over. I mean, it was a celebratory mood. Everyone's on their feet.
Arash Madani covers the Blue Jays for Rogers Sportsnet. He says the celebration at Rogers Center was short-lived.
Flying ball deep left field.
The Mariners started to claw their way back, eventually taking the lead and silencing the crowd.
You could hear a pin drop in that building.
The Mariners hung on to beat the Jays 10-9, sending the 47,000-plus fans who were here at the Rogers Center home disappointed.
Another Toronto team can't get it done.
This type of misery is nothing new to Williams, also a long-suffering Leafs fan. He watched them blow a 4-1 lead at the end of Game 7 in the 2013 Stanley Cup playoffs, then also blow a 3-1 series lead in the 2021 playoffs against the Montreal Canadiens.
It absolutely compares to the meltdowns the Leafs have had. 4-1, Game 7, third period, 8-1. 8-1.
Adding insult to injury now, all of those online memes and the taunts from rival fans.
My family in Montreal, they're relentless, yeah. And the comments are really hard.
That's probably them calling right now.
Probably them saying, what's going on?
Williams is trying to look on the bright side. He says there's still hope for the Blue Jays.
Maybe they just weren't ready to take the next step.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
We are about 2 weeks away now from municipal elections across Ontario. Advance voting now underway in some GTA cities. In Toronto, candidates elected to the next city council will need to figure out how to make up a massive budget gap to the tune of $857 million. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords joins us now. Sean, you've got a new piece out this weekend looking at the state of the city's finances. Fair to say it's not great. Can you take us through what you've learned?
That's right, Shannon. The city's dealing with an $857 million budget gap, which can largely be attributed to expenses related to COVID-19. By law, Toronto has to pass a balanced budget. So complicating all of this is the fact that Toronto has limited means to raise revenue. In short, it can hike property taxes, it can cut services, or it can increase fees. It could also lean on the province or the federal government for support. All of this comes at a time when inflation is soaring, interest rates are increasing, and city revenues linked to home sales are dropping.
Yeah, you know, a lot of those things, cutting services, raising taxes, will not have a lot of people happy. So the backdrop to all of this is, of course, the election in a couple of weeks. What are the main contenders for mayor saying?
Shannon, it won't surprise you to hear that both John Tory and Gil Penalosa are carving out positions on this. Tory is promising a tax increase below the rate of inflation while maintaining service levels. He's also pitching himself as the person to negotiate more funding from the province and the federal government to fill that fiscal hole. Penalosa says tax increases may be called for, with some targeted service cuts to help address the issue. But he also wants to talk to the province and the federal government about creating more tools to generate revenue for the city.
Right, so if people want to learn more about this, they can read your article on our website. You know, I'm just thinking, too, advanced polls are now open, but it's the long weekend. Do you think people are kind of tuned into this election race yet?
You know, I think it's really hard to tell. There's no doubt that people are suffering from election fatigue after we had a federal vote last year and a provincial vote in the summer. But I also think that people across Ontario are starting to see candidates post election signs and are likely to see more of those same folks out campaigning over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, you're right. And we'll be checking in with you again as we get closer to Election Day. Thanks so much, Sean. That's Sean Jeffords, our municipal affairs reporter, joining us in Toronto.
Thanks, Shannon.
Some lovely Latin music there, where people at Young Dundas Square are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. Today's Fall Fiesta showcasing the Latin American culture and its diversity of music, food, art, vibrant colors, and energetic dancing.
It's important for us because we don't want to, we are very proud Canadians, but we don't want to lose our roots.
It's special because it's from my country. It's from Ecuador, and I'm from Ecuador.
9 Latin American consulates in Toronto supported today's events. Throughout the month of October, the Hispanic Canadian Heritage Council will host several events, including a film festival. Okay, think fast. What's Canada's greatest Thanksgiving song? Nothing comes to mind, right? Well, Juno-nominated Toronto jazz singer Alex Bird wants to change that.
Thanksgiving, you can bet. Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays. It's like the sweetest holiday that has no representation musically here in Canada. And I also, there's one guy in particular who kind of has a market on Christmas. Everyone knows Michael Bublé, so Michael, please give me Thanksgiving. This new crooner on the block, I at least need one holiday. So we thought Thanksgiving would be special because, well, for me, it's not American Thanksgiving. This is a song that's backed around Canadian Thanksgiving and what it means to celebrate Thanksgiving in Canada, which we have such a diverse amount of people celebrating in many special different ways. And we wanted a song that spoke to Canada, was timeless and also timely. So there's references in the song to everything that we've just been through pandemic-wise. It's been a while, what's lost can now be found within a smile. We're getting to see people's faces again. And this might actually be the first semblance of a normal Thanksgiving again for people in Canada this year, 2022, I hope, fingers crossed. So we thought about the sights, the sounds, the smells, the turkey, and we just tried to capture those themes. I'm really, really excited and thrilled that it's resonating with people. The sweetest moments of them all.
Sophia,
I'm already
he says,
swaying to it.
I know, right? He says if anybody should do a Thanksgiving song, it's Alex Bird.
I love
Turkey,
it. I get
right?
it. The bird of the hour, literally. All things turkey this weekend for all the animal lovers out there. We learned it's actually a pheasant. I learned a lot of animal facts about the turkey on air today. I shared a lot of turkey jokes as well. I'll spare you, though, all of my good stuff. For the turkey lovers, the Thanksgiving forecast, tons of sunshine. It's going to go down in the books as a pretty good one. Past the gravy, you'll need the stretchy pants and the knit sweaters, though, because it is cool, as we've been talking about, but we have come a long way this weekend. It was quite a bit cooler on Saturday. Look at how evident that big trough is that we've been under compared to the other side of the country. So we talked about that earlier. Now let's get to the good stuff. Tuesday is the day to beat. We may even hit the mid-20s for some of you far away from the lakes. How far away from seasonal is this? About 5 to 7 degrees. So we will take it nearing mid-October. Even into Ottawa and Bancroft, you are above seasonal. Enjoy the fall colors while you can, though, because they will not last. We are getting our first fall storm of the season come Wednesday. It's an Alberta clipper that will merge with just the perfect timing with a bunch of Gulf moisture, and it's going to make for a couple of days to end off the work week of rain, lake effect showers, and sort of cooler temperatures. So get out and enjoy that fall hike while you can, since we don't have the Blue Jays to watch now, right, Shannon?
That's true. You're speaking my language, stretchy pants and knitted sweaters.
I'll be there with you with a hoodie as well.
Gotta love it. Have a good night. Well, before we go, we got to leave you with some of the sights from Pumpkinville outside Sherway Gardens Mall. It features pumpkin sculptures, pumpkin houses, and a candy forest, all made with over 30,000 real, you guessed it, pumpkins. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Have a great long weekend.